Okay, so we've been talking about different kinds of fossils, and scientists have organized all kinds of life, whether it is life that is currently living or whether it's life that is dead, by using a gigantic classification scheme. And so I have picked one particular kind of organism, and I'm going to list all of its different kinds of classifications. And so the broadest classification is going to be called a domain. And there are three main domains, so that you're going to have the archaeans. And so these are a one-celled organism that lives in incredibly hostile conditions, either very hot or very salty or very acidic. Okay, then you have the domain of bacteria. So again, these are one-celled organisms, and I think you all know what bacteria are. Okay, then you have the third domain of life, which is called the eukaryotes. And so the definition of a eukaryote is it's a membrane-bound organelles in their cells. That, for example, in all of the cells of our body, you have a nucleus in the middle, and then there are these things that are called mitochondria that provide the power. And if it's a plant, it would have these things called chloroplasts in there. So these are called organelles. So it's an organism that in each of its cells it has littler things that actually do the work. All right, so this hypothetical organism is going to be a eukaryote. All right, the next thing is it's going to be from the kingdom Metazoa, which means it's multicellular. So now we know that it's not going to be a one-celled organism. So whatever this thing is, it's composed of multiple cells. All right, the next thing is it comes from the superphylum Deuterostomia. And so as an embryo, the anus, the butt, forms before the mouth. The outer layer gives rise to the nervous system and the epidermis. So an example of one of these kinds of organisms would be a starfish. Can you guess what the organism is yet? Well, probably not. All right, so let's keep going here. So now we're going to go to a phylum. So a phylum is, you can think of boxes within boxes within boxes that we can put different kinds of organisms in. And so this one is going to be called a chordata, and the embryo has a notochord. So a notochord is a flexible support rod. It's kind of like the forerunner of a backbone. And so an example of an organism that has this is called a tunicate. And so these were like sac-like creatures that would draw water into their sac-like body, and then it would digest the nutrients in it, and then it would basically push it back out. All right, now this particular organism is of the subphylum Vertebrata. And so these kinds of organisms have a backbone. And so an example of this would be a lamprey. And so that's an example of a lamprey. It does not have a jaw. So that thing has teeth that would be raspers. And so what it does is it would hook on to its prey, and then those raspers would be constantly rubbing up against the flesh, and it would actually burrow its way into you. So it's not a very pleasant way to go. Okay, then you have the infraphylum Gnathrostomata. And so that means that this kind of organism has biting jaws. And so an example of this would be a shark. Okay, can you guess what the organism is? Okay, let's keep going. So the next category is classes. So we're going to go into the superclass Osteichthyes. And so these are bony fish. They have fish, these are fish, and their internal structure is composed of bones, as opposed to the shark, which was cartilage. Okay, then inside this superclass, you've got clades, and this one is Sarcopteropteri. And so these have fins, and these have muscular fins attached to the pelvic girdle by a single articulation. So an example of this would be a lungfish. Okay, then in this clade is a superclass, tetrapods. And this tetrapod has paired limbs for locomotion. So an example of this would be a frog. So in this superclass is the clade Amniota. It's a lot easier to read this stuff than it is to actually say the words. And so this has a fluid-filled egg. Example would be a snake. Okay, then inside of this clade is a class, Mammalia. And so these kinds of organisms have an enlarged brain and endothermic temperature regulation. So a snake, for example, during when it gets really cold, it gets lethargic because it has to use sunlight in order to warm its body. But these kinds of organisms can keep their body regulated. Okay, then you have order primate. So this is a sub-part to mammals, primates. Primates have enhanced vision and opposable thumbs. So an example of this would be a lemur. Okay, then inside of that you have the family hominids. And so they have robust bodies, opposable thumbs, and have no tails. So an example of this would be a chimpanzee. Then inside of this family is the genus Homo, which has habitual erect posture, ability to make tools. So an example of this would be the Neanderthals. And then finally you have the species Sapiens, who have a rounded brain case, narrow pelvis, and the ability to wear business suits. I just added that to the definition there. So by doing this, we can classify all life, whether it's life that's currently living or whether it's life that's gone extinct, and all of these different fossils that we can find, we can classify them. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about what are some typical fossils that you can find.